Welcome back to Flight Education. Today we'll be discussing geometry, specifically the different types of quadrilaterals. A quadrilateral is any polygon that has four sides. So here we have a polygon which has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. So that makes it a quadrilateral. So within the category of quadrilaterals, there are different types of four-sided shapes with specific properties. But before we talk about the specific quadrilaterals, let's talk about some key terms that will help us distinguish those different quadrilaterals. So first we have congruent. So congruent is the mathematical way of saying identical or the same. So here we have two squares, and they're not technically perfectly congruent since I just drew them freehand, but we can see that they're meant to be congruent because they have the same angles and they're the same shape, they're squares, and they have the same side length, so that makes them congruent. Now the other key term is a right angle. So a right angle is an angle that looks specifically like this, which has one arm going straight up and one to the side, and it can be rotated. So technically this could be a right angle, this could be a right angle, but basically it's what we call 90 degrees is the measure. So it's also basically any angle that's like the corner of the screen you're watching right now. All four corners of the screen you're watching on right now are right angles. And the last key term is parallel. So parallel describes two lines or line segments that, if they were to keep going on forever, would never touch. So here we have two lines, right? And so we can see that at all parts, they're equidistant from each other. So the distance between the two never changes as they continue going on, which means they'll never touch. So this distance will never change as the line continues on forever. So now that we have those key terms down, let's discuss the different types of quadrilaterals. So the most basic one we're all probably familiar with is a square. So what makes a square a square? Well, it has to have four right angles. So here we see that these angles are the same as these angles. These are right angles or 90-degree angles. So we can see four of those here, right? And then it has to have four congruent sides, which means that each side is the same length on a square. And then it also has to have two sets of parallel sides. So see, these two sides are parallel because if they were to keep going, they would never touch. And the same with these two sides. So there's two pairs of parallel sides. This is one pair, and this is another pair. So that's what makes a square a square. Now let's talk about rectangles. So a rectangle has the same properties as a square, but only the opposite sides have to be congruent. So here we can see that this side and this side are obviously not congruent, but this side and this side are congruent, and this side and this side are also congruent. So although not all four sides are congruent, there are two sets of congruent sides. And the other properties are the same. There's four right angles and there's two sets of parallel sides. So now let's look at parallelograms. So parallelograms are also quadrilaterals, and they have the same properties as rectangles in the terms of they have two sets of parallel sides. See how these two sides are parallel? If they keep going, they never touch. Same with these two sides. And they have two sets of congruent sides. So this side is congruent to this side, and this side is congruent to this side. But unlike a rectangle, they're not required to have right angles. So we can see that this angle is smaller than a right angle. Like this would be a right angle. This is, as you can see, smaller, and this angle is bigger. So these are obviously not right angles. So that's what makes this a parallelogram. And then a rhombus. So the relationship between a parallelogram and a rectangle is the same as a rhombus and a square. Because just like with a parallelogram and a rectangle, a rhombus is the same thing as a square, but the right angles are not necessary. So it has four congruent sides, just like a square, and it has two sets of parallel sides, just like a square. The only difference is that it doesn't necessarily have four right angles, because as we can see here, these are not right angles. And the last quadrilateral I'm going to talk about is a trapezoid. So the thing that makes a trapezoid is that it only has one set of parallel sides. So we can see here that these two sides, if they were to keep going, these would never touch. These are parallel. They're always the same distance from each other. But these two sides, we can see that if these were to continue on, they would cross. So that means they're not parallel. And that's what makes this a trapezoid. And that's going to be it for today's lesson. We have helpful worksheets in the description below for you to practice what you've learned, and there's also a link to our website, which has more worksheets on other subjects. Also, don't forget to subscribe and check out our channel to see more videos like these. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.